78% of suicide rates worldwide are men. What can we do to help them? In the United States, we have a mental health crisis. People struggling with mental illnesses do not have the access to proper care. Create actually equal situations. Not situations claiming to be equal but then put women above men or actively bring men down. I think that instead of blaming men for being weak or incompetent, for them failing or not being what people expected, should be more focused on how they can improve and maybe the system that got them there. I feel like for me a lot of my stress and depression is the way people will perceive me if I don't make a lot of money or can't take care of someone's daughter. I always feel like I'm gonna be the blame for everything. Women, stop turning men away at first glance. I know men do this too, but if a guy always gets turned down at first glance and ends up being a great person, I could lower their self-esteem, which could lead to the thought of suicide. This is a shower though. Stop giving women all of the advantages when it comes to custody and visitation of children. I know of 2 guys who have killed themselves because their exes have manipulated the system and stopped them from having access to their children, and I'm sure there is many more. There's nothing anyone can do. Have more female suicides to balance it out. Probably do something about the sexism against them. Constantly painting them as the villain. Never listening to their side of the story. Just general mistreatment. Edit, I'm gonna say it. In Western society, men are the most mistreated. Stop putting so much pressure on us then, criticizing us when we don't respond exactly how you expect us to. For example, we have to make the first move, we have to do so to an unknown set of criteria, some of which we have no control over. If we're rejected, we have to move on immediately without any consideration for our feelings. We have to constantly pursue without going overboard but without appearing like we don't care. We're rarely if ever pursued ourselves unless we live up to unrealistic standards, etc. Men in essence have lost their value. With women providing for themselves and the majority of them not wanting children, I think a lot of men feel useless. Women can ignore a large part of the male population that maybe once they wouldn't, while at the same time milking them of attention without returning it. One angle. Jobs. Before we could justify meaningless jobs because you were providing for a family, now most people work a shit office or retail job and you are but a peon making money for someone else with no justification for it other than surviving. Slavery. Men are disposable. Nobody cares and they see women get the world handed to them. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us that a small compliment goes a long ways. Get rid of feminism. Without it, us men wouldn't have to hear how shitty we are and how worthless we are compared to women. In a world where first world countries are all equal, we still hear the cancerous screams of ugly and overweight feminazis claiming that men are filth, and honestly it hurts to hear that shit, and I know I'm not the only one. Don't allow them to become idle. Increase funding of trade schools. Invest in arts. Stop sending them to war. Invest in marriage counseling and people to stay together. Don't shame men for feeling sadness or fear because it's not manly. Pay a decent wage. 99% of my stress and anxiety comes from working hard not stop and never being able to make enough to be stable. Corporate greed is so out of control. After 23 years as a truck driver hauling fuel, I now have to find something else because my hours have been cut again. We're changing from a 5-day work week to 4. For operational needs. We don't want to pay overtime and we haven't given an hourly wage increase that matches inflation, so go fuck yourself but enjoy your extra time at home. Stop focusing solely on women suffering and put some focus on men's struggles. Take their feelings seriously. We start vilifying booze the way we vilified cigarettes. This might be an unorthodox proposition, but here's the thing, people often do it impulsively when they are drunk. I work in the field of mental health and volunteer in prisoner rehab and helping minority groups integrate. From my experience, one of the most important factors is identity. Identity in terms of how that individual sees themselves personally and how see their place in a society, culture, etc. I remember seeing a statistic that as the Industrial Revolution spread across Europe, the suicide rate also rose in the countries that embraced it. Imagine you're a carpenter making a table. You carefully craft and piece it together gradually. At the end of the process you get to see and enjoy the fruits of your hard work and skill. A sense of achievement and certainty goes along with that. You're a carpenter, you turn wood into useful things, and the proof of that is in front of you. Now imagine you work in a factory which makes tables. It's your job to make one of the legs of the table. You never get to see the finished product, it's someone else's job to inspect the finished piece. You make table legs, you're a small part in a large system, the thing you produce is only a small part of the whole. You're not really sure what to call yourself, but you know that if you were to stop tomorrow, someone else will step right in. Who an individual considers themselves to be factors into a lot of other aspects, such self-worth and the value that someone places on life itself. Hopes and dreams for the future are intrinsically tied to who you think you are and what you think you have the potential to be. So yeah, in my experience, identity is important. Let people talk about having suicidal thoughts without being required to lock them up in a hospital. We know that the consequences of reaching out may be losing our job, rights, and freedom, so it feels safer in the short term to keep it secret. Change family life so a man's ex-wife can't cheat on him and still get the house, kids, and half of the rest of the man's assets. Men's risk of suicide goes up from 4 times higher than women's to fucking 11 after a divorce. Be there for them, actually be there for them. Don't just say you are. Don't mock men for showing emotions besides anger or happiness. If you commit suicide, you are Darwinism at work. Suck it up. I worked in a homeless shelter for men and talked to a lot of different guys and figured out what went wrong. In terms of suicide, for most men child support is an absolute killer. We had good guys whose wives cheated, they got child support for 3 kids, the guy's check was garnished so much he couldn't afford to survive. His weekly check was $124 after 52 hours. He got into alcohol from depression, and then some other type of drug like PCP. He one day never showed up for his bed, and that was that, more than likely lost of life. It's wrong that child support can ruin someone financially. Another major problem for men is relationships. If a guy has a flaw, more than likely most women, even those uglier in relation to him, won't date him. If he is ugly or has a disability, maybe a wart on his head, etc., most women will automatically overlook him. For a lot of guys, they become so lonely it leads to depression, anger, and then suicide. Not fucking stigmatize males as strong people, but as normal human beings that try their best but need to take a break every so often. Help us when we are at our weakest and understand that we have feelings. When we are up against the wall, help us find the other way out, because suicide being the easier alternative is the reality for so many of us. Girls, just ask more men out. This might sound silly, but one of the biggest drivers in male depression is just loneliness. And now we're in a sexual revolution where women, and men, are more likely to be more promiscuous and get to be single much more often and for longer. Now power to the women for that, but on the flip side, men are held to so much higher standards now where if you're below average, you're much less likely to even get chances. And now that men have to tiptoe around women, a lot of them just say fuck it and give up. As a female, I think it should be socially acceptable for men to show emotion and not have to keep it in fear that they'll get called weak. Men are human beings that can, like other people, show emotion, and they should be helped, not laughed at. Stop classifying men you find unattractive as rapey, perv, or creepy. You don't know us. Most of the time we just want to talk to another human being without them thinking we're about to kidnap them. Stop making them look like bad guys for being men. No more BS like mansplaining comments, rape culture, etc. Judge each man on only his actions. Also divorce rape. Not letting a man see his kids. Stop belittling abused men. Understand that more often than you think the people trying the hardest to make everyone else smile are hurting and don't want anyone to feel the way they do. Often those of us most desperate for a shoulder to cry on are the least capable of asking for it, wouldn't want to burden our friends and family after all. Don't assume that because they don't complain that they have everything figured out. Sometimes you might have to initiate the conversation for your friends to be able to tell you what they need. So ask how they feel. It might be uncomfortable, but they will appreciate that you care.